I'm really curious about these drain fields. This is really a new one on me. It must have been something they came up with recently.
It's pretty exciting. It seems new here in this part of the country, but it's not new in other parts of the country. There's entire industries built around this, working in states all around the country and all around the world. And there's a whole variety of out-of-the-box nitrogen-reducing septic systems, because this problem's not unique to Long Island. But what's really exciting is this non-proprietary drain field technology. It's almost not correct to call it technology. You basically have a small bilge pump that pressure doses a drain field slowly over time so that it doesn't all flood in when you take a shower or do the laundry. And there's media, which is basically a combination of sand and wood chips and things like that, and simply utilizing the naturally occurring bacteria in our soils, in our surface soils, and in the media that is put under the drain fields. It's over 90% effective at removing nitrogen, as well as, really interestingly, removing a whole bunch of other contaminants of concern. And so it's exciting. We think that in the next year or so, these will be approved in Suffolk County. They're already been tested in Florida. They're being tested in Cape Cod, which has the same soils. Now, Stony Brook University is going to be working with them, but I think it's going to happen pretty soon. And the fact that it's non-proprietary creates opportunities and challenges. So the opportunities are you don't have to go to a single manufacturer for these. The challenges are that the regulators are going to have to actually design the specifications so that the installers know exactly what is required.
Well, it's nice to have that in our toolkit. There's 500,000 cesspools and septic tanks between Nassau and Suffolk County. We're looking at sewering. We're looking at on-site denitrification systems, and now this. So I guess you'd say it's going to be a mixed solution.
Yeah, it's absolutely. Different communities are going to call for different things. In some communities, sewering absolutely makes sense. Honestly, in some communities, they know they should have been sewered 30, 40 years ago, and they just weren't. And in other communities, sewering will never make sense. And so having many different options for these decentralized technology, it's really great. And the main driver has been we need to make the cost comparable to the cost of the old style septic systems. And I think what's exciting about these drain fields is that those costs are on par.
And how much money are we talking here?
Whenever you install a septic system, a lot of the cost is driven by the particular site that you have, and so the real goal is to get the cost of the new systems on par with the cost of what it would cost to install the traditional system on the site that you have. So.
Well, there's going to have to be a lot put into the planning of this. To inventory all those septic tanks and cesspools. One of the action items you offered to the audience was just that. Find out what you have and where it is. And without that basic knowledge, I don't know how we really start to roll things out.
Yeah, I can tell you the facility that I work at and live at, actually, it still has old brick-lined cesspools. And we're in the midst now of installing a constructed wetland as well as one of these new drain fields for some of the different buildings. And so it's sort of a demonstration where people will be able to come and look at it and see how it works. So.
Out at Cold Spring Harbor.
Yes.
Yeah. Lovely facility.
Yeah.
So we both grew up on the bay, both clammed, both saw its disappearance, and both have worked to try and bring it all back. As you know, there's an initiative to route the sewer line from the proposed Ronkonkoma hub. It needs to go somewhere south through Savo, West Savo, and Oakdale, with the goal of taking out these low-lying cesspools and septic tanks. Well, maybe drain fields would help there too, but point is, the hope or the surmise is that if we remove these cesspools that are basically at the water table, the water in the area will become healthy enough that we could start to see a return of oystering and clams, of course, as well, in sufficient numbers that there would be local filtering of the water, and the bay in that area would be cleaner.
Yeah, so there's I was a science advisor for the Oakdale and West Sayville community reconstruction team after Sandy, and it turns out the water table is really high in those communities, just couple feet right below the surface, and so a
Yeah.
lot of those septic
During a
systems,
storm and high tide, that's a whole other matter, right?
yeah, it's a real problem. Even on moon tides or rain events that elevate the water table, you have failing septic systems, and it turns out that in many cases, nitrogen pollution is also coming from the same source as pathogen pollution. Pathogen pollution, it can be viruses and bacteria that come from human waste from failing septic systems. And so the area off of Oakdale, Great River, Browns River, and West Sayville has repeatedly shown up worse and worse and worse. And since I've been working in Great South Bay for about 15 years, we've lost about 2,500 acres of shellfishing area because the contamination line keeps going further and further south into the bay. And so the community reconstruction zone identified sewers as something that was really important for their vision of revitalizing their waterfront, of getting people out swimming again and getting people out shellfishing again. And I think it really does make a lot of sense, obviously, to transition out of those old failing septic systems, and to get either sewering or some of this new technology. And there'll be a cost-benefit analysis for each one, but I think that sewering, if that line comes down there, sewering those communities is a really important part.
Well, especially if done right, you can get $100,000 revenue per acre in oyster farming.
Yeah.
And it would certainly help the oyster farmers to the west out in the town of Babylon, I would think, because they're getting that nitrogen because of the mixture of the water.
Yes, harmful algal blooms are a real problem for oyster farmers, particularly the toxic ones. We have so many different kinds now; it's almost hard to keep track. Some just slow the growth of the shellfish. Some actually kill the shellfish. Some they can do just fine, but they become poisonous to eat. And then certainly, if you have the bacterial pollution from failing septic systems, then you can't eat the shellfish as well. So cleaning up the waters has multiple benefits to the shellfish farmers.
Well, let's wrap this up because this is all about what we can do and what has worked too.
Look, I think success stories are really important to point out because this is absolutely a solvable problem. Even though this nitrogen pollution, they call it eutrophication, is a global problem, it doesn't require a global solution like climate change does, because water pollution is local. And so our water bodies are local and the sources of the pollution are local. And in places where we've addressed it, we've fixed entire bays in Hawaii where the corals have come back from modern sewering and moving the sewer pipe. Boston Harbor. But you don't have to go that far. You can go, Tampa Bay has more eelgrass now than it did in the 1950s.
That's great.
And 1 million people have moved into that watershed during that time frame. And it's all because of modern sewering. The Long Island Sound is a little bit closer to home, and we've seen an amazing recovery from the reductions in nitrogen, 58% reduction from the point sources of nitrogen in Long Island Sound. The dead zone has shrank. I believe it's shrank by about 22%, that dead zone in the Western Sound. Further east in the Sound, in Niantic Bay, where a sewer pipe was extended and moved to a smarter location, all the eelgrass recovered since that. And so there's success stories right here at home, and I can tell you personally, I'm a fisherman. In the last few years, I've been fishing in places that I never would have fished just a few years ago because they were part of that Western Sound dead zone, and we were catching sea bass in places that used to have no life at all. So it's very exciting to see that recovery happening. And so we know it works, and we know that it's just a little more challenging transitioning all these septic systems, but we know we can do it.